Welcome to this. This is the April 19th meetup of the Coast Division, our virtual meetup. So just a couple of quickies here in terms of what we're going to talk about today. So first thing is we have a tour scheduled on May 3rd. That's Saturday, May 3rd. Unfortunately, when I first wrote this, somehow I got May 2nd on it, and that confused people. So it is Saturday, May 3rd, not Friday, May 2nd. And that will be of the Hendy Iron Works Museum. So this is actually a picture of the Hendy Iron Works, which was a huge foundry in Sunnyvale. You can see how large it was at one point. It later became the Westinghouse Marine Division, and now it's the Northrop Grumman Marine facility, and they build a lot of things for marine applications. So we're going to have a tour there. They have a museum that's a museum of what they did at Hendy and iron working in general. So we're going to have that at 10 o'clock on Saturday, May 3rd. This is not open to the public. It's a closed museum. It's inside the secure facility at the Northrop Grumman plant. So you have to actually have a setup tour ahead of time. So one of the things asking is everybody please sign up in advance. If you want to go, you need to sign up in advance. And in fact, I think I need to close these off a week before. So they're going to close in about a week. I'll send another email out probably on Monday or Tuesday to the whole PCR, and I'll have the close date on that. So just go ahead and sign up. There's a Google form. It's use tinyurl.com/coasthendy. And that'll take you to the form and just enter your information. You do need to be a U.S. citizen. So very simply, just if you're interested in going to that, come along and do it. I think we have about 28 or 29 people signed up so far. The other thing.
Oh, that's excellent.
The other thing, by the way, on May 3rd, and I blew this in terms of overscheduling these at the same time, is actually the weekend of the West Side reunion up in Sonora. So, if you're a narrow gauger, you may be more interested in going up to Sonora for the West Side reunion. So I want to make sure that we talk about that as well. The other thing is to put on your calendar is the Coast Auction is June 1st. That will be in Alameda at the Alameda Senior Center. So that's really all I had today. I'll go ahead and stop sharing here and jump back to the group. And anybody has anything interesting to talk about. I have one little thing to potentially talk about, a clinic, and see if there's interest. But anybody got anything else that's interesting, events coming up, anything to talk about?
Phil, I had a quick question, which is I filled out that Google form, but it doesn't give you an acknowledgement that you signed up for the tour.
I'm going to send an email out probably I'll send it out on Monday to everybody who signed up so far saying, I got your registration. You're right. Actually, that's an interesting thought. I need to look at how you do a confirmation. David, you are signed up.
Good. I'm looking forward to it.
Just looking here, I just realized I have one person who put their first name in the name place and their last name where their email is supposed to go. So the good news is, because everybody's a member, I have all your info. So I can just change it. So cool. Yeah, no, I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be I think it'll be an interesting tour. The thing that I thought was interesting is apparently a third of the Liberty ships were built on the West Coast, and they built all the engines for the Liberty ships there at the Hendy. So they very much were specialists, I think, in marine technology on the West Coast. So they built a lot of those things for any of the shipbuilding that happened on the West Coast during the, years prior to that not being a thing that we build anymore on the West Coast. I don't know that we do much shipbuilding in this area anymore. So anyway, that was about it. So I wanted to ask a question. So this is if you were at our meetup at Golden State Model Railroad Museum, we had kind of a little display, and I brought this model. So this is an O-scale model of it's actually it's actually designed after the Agnew Station, which is where the California Central Club is at, as the prototype. It turns out that I had already defined the area on the layout. This is on the layout where it goes, and that had already been defined, and it was unfortunately only 12 inches. This board that was built was set up to build the station. I was only 12 inches. The actual station was 57 feet long, so now this one's 47. So it's been a little bit compressed in a couple of areas, but I've actually put a clinic together on how, the steps I went through to build this. Is that something that's interesting to either have as, something on this event, or, we potentially could do that as a clinic for the Golden State Model Railroad, or not the Golden State, at the auction on the first.
Auction.
So
I think it sounds for scenery builders like myself, construction techniques and definition and those types of things is always interesting. I'm not sure I'd want to spend an hour listening to you, Phil. No offense, but I think it would be interesting to see, what are the, steps to go upon? Because you just mentioned that you started with a defined space, which
right.
is, and, usually I build something and I look at, okay, it's going to go over there, sort of, and then I build it and I put it there and then I structure around it. And so
Right.
I think I would find it interesting.
Okay.
I don't know about anybody else, but
response there. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, so that's that's been it's actually kind of there's some interesting things because it was designed not to have the roof taken off, and it turns out I showed some pictures of it in the build, but the ceilings were actually 3D printed for the spaces with light fixtures, and they're designed to be left in place. So I know, it's I did this. I built a couple of buildings, and you take them to a contest and you take the roof off and you put it next to it, and it looks really cool. But then you put it on your layout and you now have this conundrum of, do I take the roof off and have it look not realistic, or do I leave the roof on and have it look realistic? So one of the things I liked about this is a prototype. I mean, I'll put the thing back up so you can kind of see it because it's obvious. The windows are big. When I went and looked at it, it was the windows are both the waiting room windows, but also more importantly, the office windows are huge. And so what that lets you do is it lets you actually see back into the office much more deeply, in terms of being able to see detail, et cetera. But then, like I said, what I decided to do was not do a roof off kind of try to make it a stick built type model, but rather do something that really was looking good, constrained to these views through the windows. So, what you're seeing through here, and unfortunately, because the camera, and I probably could change this, the camera didn't focus inside the window; it focused on the outside. But these are all prints in here. They're all photo prints, and so the walls are all just printed. This is actually a 3D printed little ticket window here. But again, when you look through here, everything's pretty simple inside here, but it looks very good when you look at it. Again, just looking through the windows, being constrained to that viewpoint. So, walk through how to do that if there's interest.
It sounds fascinating, at least again to me.
Cool. I will go ahead and plan on scheduling that for June 1st, then, instead of doing it on here, and we'll do it that way. I thought about doing it on here and doing it in 2 pieces over 2 weeks, but we can always repeat it here if it makes sense. After you guys see it there, it's one of those things. One of the things I've kind of found with clinics, when I first got into model railroading, I came from the kind of technology side of the world, where we used to go to seminars and you do a session at a seminar or at a conference, and because it was in technology and it was always about kind of new things, nothing ever tends to get repeated. And at least not repeated more than maybe once or maybe at a couple of different conferences at the same time frame. I came in, I kind of saw something that, you went to a convention and somebody did the same presentation at 4 different conventions. And what I realized is that each one you're getting a different group of people. And so it actually turns out doing these things 3 or 4 times actually makes sense because you get a broader group of people. Now, unfortunately, for people who've seen it before, that it's the same thing, but hopefully there are multiple things to do at many events. So anyway, so let me see. Let me see now if I've got these pictures here and I can put them up. So I went, oh. Finding what you've saved is always a challenge. Here we go. So let me put this over here. So I went last week we got together, last 2 weeks ago we got together. I actually had gone down to La Mesa, which is the San Diego Model Railroad Museum. They're one of the HO layouts. So I assume everybody's been to San Diego to the museums at Balboa Park. They've got basically, I spent enough time there, I kind of got to talk to everybody. So there's an N scale layout. There's a 3-rail O scale layout. There's the San Diego Model Railroad Club, and they operate an HO layout and an O scale 2-rail layout that are both pretty large. Actually, I was quite impressed. The O scale layout there, I spent some time with the guys there, and it's actually probably at least 50 to 70% larger than the one in Pleasanton. It's a quite large, nice layout. But the layout that's probably kind of from the model railroading perspective, the crown jewel is the La Mesa Club, which has it's a 2-story HO layout. So it actually, most of the layout is on one level, but then there's an upper level and it climbs up to the upper level. And they're basically, modeling the pass there across the pass and the Tehachapi Loop, et cetera. And so they have an operating session. I think the next one's in May 12th or something like that. And what they do, they actually do different types of operations, but my understanding when I was there was they're having issues with their CTC panel. So running CTC or more modern operations is kind of a challenge right now. So what I went down to was a timetable and train order. So this is basically operating the layout like it was 1953 in California. So it's the SP and the Santa Fe running over there because it was a shared and joint path across the mountains into LA. Actually, I've got the timetable. I should, when I get done with it, I'll run down and grab it and I can show it and show you what it looks like. They run about 8 or 9 scheduled trains, and a number of them run as 2 or 3 sections. So there'll be a section 1, a section 2, a section 3 in each direction over the layout. And that's all managed by, I think there are four agent operators and that the dispatcher talks to at different places on the layout that manages communications to the trains. So the train, there's no radio. It's all kind of done with train orders that are essentially transcribed by an operator. So it's a 2-day. It's 2 days of operations. So it starts on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, and they theoretically run till 8 o'clock each night. Though we ended up breaking up closer to 7 o'clock, I think, on both nights, and definitely on Sunday night it was closer to 7 o'clock. I went down on Friday morning because when I talked to Bryn Eckroot, who's from up here, is very involved down there as kind of the chief dispatcher for the layout. When I talked to Bryn, he said, well, if you come down on Friday and help with setup and cleaning, it's always appreciated. I thought that would be a great way to learn the layout and find out more about it. And if you decide to do it, I would heartily suggest going down on Friday morning. Because what you do is you end up helping them clean the layout. You learn the different parts of the layout where they are. And then I helped a bit with staging trains. So I ended up running about 2 or 3 trains over the layout and during getting them ready for staging and getting ready to run on Saturday. On Saturday, I basically helped with the Santa Fe yard in Bakersfield. So in Bakersfield, they have an SP yard and a Santa Fe yard because that's kind of the northern end of the railroad. And from there, it goes into staging. So basically, you got a yard and the trains come out of staging or come in off the railroad and go into staging, and you've got some switching there. So I kind of helped as the yard hostler helper. By the afternoon, really was pretty much doing most of the yard stuff myself. The guy I was working with I think was quite happy to have me take over and do a bit more of it, which again was really good because you learn a lot about kind of the structure of the layout. On Sunday, I actually in the morning ran trains, and then in the afternoon took one of the agent operator roles. Actually, I was in Tehachapi and actually managed that, and that's where you actually come, or not Tehachapi. Okay, can't pull a blank, but it's on the first station coming out of the southern staging, and so basically, you've got working with the dispatcher to give trains clearance and orders onto the layout, et cetera, et cetera. So all in all, it was good. I do have some pictures if you're interested. I took a few pictures of kind of some of the areas that you don't get into if you go see it publicly. So this area you can actually view publicly. This over here on the right, these are actually windows where the public can look in, but you get more of an idea of kind of the structure of it. This area I would say is what we would typically call a plywood princess or kind of layout. There's not a lot of real scenery down in this area. It's really much more of an operations area. What you're seeing on the right here is the yard there at Bakersfield, coming around more yard, and down here at the far end is the Santa Fe yard, and then this actually goes out onto is a break that comes in through a back way, and exactly what the layout is. I didn't take a picture of the layout, and I should have. That's another picture of the same thing. This is a view from the other end. So this is the Santa Fe yard here, and the Bakersfield yard is down here. And then these are the tracks that go around to staging. So you kind of get an idea of kind of how large things are there. And you can see this is all underneath because basically above this, there's a second floor. This is where the second floor is in this area that's up above. I think I got 2 of all of those pictures. This was I think this is going to take a while. I think this started early, and I haven't edited these, so there it is. So this was actually, I ran a passenger train at one point over the layout. So this is the passenger train on the Santa Fe passenger train on the Tehachapi Loop. So this is the upstairs. So this is kind of above where we were, and on the left down below is the area you see that's going up to the Tehachapi Loop. And then this is on the right here. What you're seeing over here on the right is the kind of exposed layout, and that goes around the corner. And behind that wall to the right there is the staging area, and that's basically the same length as this area here, and it's an aisle width wide with double deck layout on both sides. One side kind of continues to be the running distance, the layout, and the other side is the other part's all staging. What's interesting about their staging is they actually stage both the 1953 and I think they're 1990 something trains. So, and the staging is all done. If you think about a double deck layout where in the center, the lower deck is about this high, they actually have doors on it with locks, so they can actually close all the doors and lock all the equipment in on the staging tracks. and then open it up. And their engines actually, I don't know if I took a picture of it. They store their engines the same way, and basically think about it as a yard with a bunch of tracks where they pull the engines in, and then there's a lid they close and lock down. So the trains that are in that box are actually all locked away. So that allows them to actually leave a lot of very expensive equipment in the layout. I think this is going to be the same. No, it's a slightly different video. This is, oh, come on, put a blank on the name. It'll come to me in a moment. I can actually make this full screen like this. But so this is typical, the typical trains they run. The trains are typically 30 to 40 cars. So they're actually fairly prototypical for the time frame. And you see primarily, you know, this, because this is 53, you see a lot of F units, a lot of early Jeeps, you know, basically the equipment that the railroads were running. You kind of see the length of that train there. Kind of pretty typical of what you see on the layout. This is the big scene, and I'm putting a total blank on the city name, but it's that very large scene they have that the public can walk around. And this was actually a train that they were double heading. So one of the other things that you can do as a job, there were about 30 people there running the layout. What you can do, one of the roles is to be the actual helper engines on the grade and cut those in, and then have to run those with the primary operator up the grade. So this is actually an area that you don't see from the public perspective. So this actually is down in the middle. So this is underneath, right up above this was where we were up there, where the Tehachapi Loop is. And this is down underneath. There's a series of stations and switching operations that are underneath that part of the layout, and again are not really visible to the public. And this is kind of the other end of that. So this is all kind of the stuff that's hidden in the middle, and you see kind of the combination of, you know, on the left, some very well done scenery that's been completed. In the middle, there's additional scenery, and then you come around the corner here, and there's some staging in this area. And this is another view in that area. This is a view, actually, this is where those yards were over here. This is the public viewing, and this is kind of the next area behind that, which is, again, these are incredibly long runs, because from, you know, one end of this space to the other end of space is probably 100 feet. And so you've got, typically between towns, you've got 70, 80, maybe even 100 feet of track running between station locations. This was their box for storing engines. So basically this cover comes down over this box, and you'll see there's actually two of them here, and they cover the box and they put all the engines in, and that way they're safely stored, but they stay on the layout. And this was just a picture I took of the O-scale layout I liked. One thing that was very interesting, and I had a long talk with Brent about this, is that they have basically, and this is a club thing for anyone who's got a club, they did an analysis of the California state law and came to the conclusion that having anyone under 18 in the club was a very high legal liability, and that the requirements of the law to actually avoid that are really quite challenging. So they've actually gone where anyone under 18 is not allowed to be involved in the club at all. So something to think about. We're actually starting to have some discussions at the Pleasanton Club around this and how you manage it. So, but it was fun. It was a fun and interesting event. If you're into operations and haven't done it, I'd encourage you to think about doing it. You know, cost wise, I flew down on Southwest. I think that was about $250. I stayed at the Best Western, which was recommended, and where what I would do if you go down is stay there, because there are people that are staying there and you get rides from there over to the museum in Balboa Park. That was about $250. They charge $30 for non-members to participate. And then what I did was I ended up taking a lift from the airport over to the museum, and that cost about $30, $35. So you kind of add that up, and it's a little $600 to go down and do it. I did not rent a car. I decided I didn't really need to, and it turned out I didn't. Paul Weiss was actually down there. There were a number of folks from the Bay Area that were down there. Paul was one of them, and I was able to catch rides back and forth with Paul over to the hotel and back. And then at the end, he was staying over, and so I actually got a ride back to the airport with him. So it was all good. But a fun event if you get a chance. That's all I have.
It looks like a great activity. I miss I looked at your station, which I think is very wonderful. And my background, because I don't have any idea how to share things, and I'll move out of the way, is we were up in Fortuna, which you go north forever and in the middle of nowhere, but beautiful redwood trees, is Fortuna. It's near Eureka. And they've moved I guess it's the Northern Pacific or whatever it is, this train station into this enormous park. And what's happened is that they've turned this into a museum, but the building itself is very maintained.
Very similar design, but a little bit more of the I don't know what's the right word, the detail finishing on it. That one was built by the North Pacific Coast, where the one in Agnew was built by the South Pacific Coast.
Yeah, but they're cousins, so to speak.
Well, someone made the comment that the reason they're all so tall is that they built everything with 10-foot ceilings because they didn't have air conditioning, and it was a way of cooling the rooms down, that the rooms stayed cooler when they were taller.
That
could
be
higher ceilings, which makes perfect sense, because I mean, you think about it, when this stuff was built, and that's the Paro Station was built, I think, in 1878 or something like that. I mean, clearly they didn't have air conditioning. I don't think they had any fans either. I don't think they really had electricity back then. So, the reality is that the only thing you could do when it got hot is you open the windows. Now, what's interesting is the windows are actually a little smaller. The ones in Santa Clara are larger because obviously it gets warmer in Santa Clara in the summer than it does up in.
Fortuna is hot for them, I think, is 80s or mid 80s. Exactly. It's up there very far in Northern California. The other interesting thing was they kept the structure inside, so the rooms are about the same and all that sort of stuff. But the most interesting thing is they've turned it into a community, sort of a regional museum, which, if you've ever been to these things, is everybody's old stuff ends up in the museum kind of thing. Right. So you had, 10 or 15 of these two-man saw blades, because there's redwoods there and old ice boxes, etc. There you go. It's very, and you look at it, it's a very similar design, except it's a lot more that breadboard, whatever they call it, breadboard graffiti, the kind of thing. And then what's interesting about this one is that it's actually got the corners are cut off. I mean, if you look at that, the corners, they've actually made, a 45-degree piece of wall across the corner,
That's very interesting. That's a
Yeah.
cool design.
Yeah, it's as I say, you got to remember this is in their biggest activity up there is a rodeo or something like that, and it's a regional thing, and it runs a week and a half, and it's an enormous activity. And this is in the public, in this public park,
Yep.
so this is their big tourist attraction,
Yep.
and they've put a lot of effort into it. They've also, and I never took a picture of it. They've also got a caboose next to it on the other side of the flagpole. Other side of the flagpole, uh, and it's very, very restored, but empty. So
Yep.
you don't see anything inside. And as I say, the tracks never ran there. I don't think. I think they ran further down towards the Eel River. Uh, so they moved everything. But it was interesting, when you got to find trains someplace, and
Well,
this is the best I could do.
yeah, and there are trains kind of every place. So, yeah, actually, so I share this. This is in the presentation that I've been going through the clinic. These were actually these are actually a couple of pictures I got from the guys at the SPCRR group in Ardenwood. They had in their archive. So this is actually the Agnew station as it was built. When it was built, this is kind of the left is an older picture. You can notice there's a ticket window here in this picture. And in the right, they've actually added on this pop out, which was an addition to the office, which was done at a later date. But you can see the same thing, the design up here with the lightning rods on either end of the building. And what I found very interesting about this building, and this ended up driving a lot of how it was designed and built, is every window in the building has essentially a mantle on top of it. So if you ever built a mantle for a house, it's basically built up of a series of pieces of different kinds of trim, cut at a 45, so they angle together for the sides. And when you look at these things, that's basically every door and every window has a big mantle on top of it, which it turns out you actually can't get commercially. So those were actually designed and 3D printed. Fran Foley 3D printed them for me.
I live in a 1910 house, which has tons of this stuff, and I found out from some people that are familiar with this. The guys got 50 cents to $1 a day building these mantles, and God forbid you want to replace or add or anything like that. It is impossible. There's forms and a lot of them are made by hand, and the
Right.
curves. It's just astounding.
Yeah, it's pretty. It was a pretty interesting thing to see how that was done. So, but that's cool. That's a cool station. And it's what's interesting is you look at East Coast stations of the same period, they were not that different. There was a lot of kind of I won't call it standardization, but call it plagiarism, where people were looking at what other people were doing and saying, "Oh, that made sense." So, what was
Well,
cool about
it's
this?
why reinvent the wheel.
Yep. Well, what was cool about this model from a modeling perspective is the building is only 14 feet deep. Under the eaves, it's a little wide. Obviously, the roof's quite a bit wider, but the basic building was only 14 feet, which kind of is an interesting perspective because you realize that the California Central Railroad Club is inside that building, and it's a fairly narrow, small building when you actually look at it that way. And when you look at the pictures of the building today, you do realize that it is probably held up totally by the bench work. It's I went and I went down, I took a bunch of pictures off the internet. I'll go through them and do the clinic and then I went to do measurements and took measurements. And by the way, I'll talk about this. I don't know if anybody's found this on your iPhone, the measuring tool on your iPhone. It's absolutely brilliant. When I went to measure the building, it actually only took me about 45 minutes to do probably 100 different measurements off the building because I was able to do them with my phone. I took 100-foot tape with me I have, and I didn't ever actually use it. I did all the measurements using the phone. And so,
Phil, do me a favor. When you do your clinic, put your clinic together, spend some time on the interior and the photos you used and the things that you put together, because I do a lot of that, and I'm always interested in, what did you use and etc. Just make a note to yourself to spend a little
here
time on that.
I'll show you this. So this was I'll do one little.
No, you don't have to do it now.
No, I'll show you what I've been doing, so you can tell me if this makes sense. So this was kind of the this is the interior. So what I did was in the presentation I walked through. These are the prints. So I talked about this when we talked about using PowerPoint. Is you basically make slides that get printed as 4x6 matte prints. And I do that at my local Mike's Photo, and they charge me like 49 cents to print these. So each one of these is a wall. These are the four walls in the waiting room. This is the wall material in the office. The lower part of the wall in the office was actually wainscoting. And I did that to make the wall a little bit thicker when I glued it down to the base. What's down here, these are the signs. So for example, these are the signs that you see on the end of the building. These were some doors for the interior. These are some extra pictures. And this is the floor. And then what I actually did was I walked through, for example, this wall is one of the interior walls. And so if you look at it, this is what printed, and that's actually this wall that you see right here. And it's just glued on the interior. And so when you look through this window, the beauty of it is you can't see 3 dimensions because you're looking across from a very defined view when you look through one of these windows. So when you look at it from above, it kind of looks flat, but when you look at it from outside the model, it doesn't. And then I'll walk through how you actually build that wall out of pieces, in PowerPoint. When you could use Inkscape or anything you want. So yeah, I tried to go through in some level of detail how you do that. It's really not, by the way, it's really not that hard. And for, if you want to build at the, so I took this model down to the convention and put it into the contest. And I literally got done putting in the contest, looked around and saw a model there that was in the contest that was pretty unbelievable. It was if you were at the convention, it was a model of the West Side powerhouse, of the West Side boiler house. And I think it had 3,500 individual parts in it. It was pretty amazing. And I realized from a contest perspective, it's not going to be a contest winner, but it did get 101 points at the judging. And again, I made the point.
Anything over 88.
Right. No. And again, it was designed very specifically not to take the roof off and look at it and say, is that framing like a regular building? It's designed to be looked at from the outside as a completed model, which I have to say, I've kind of come more to the conclusion that probably 95% of our models, that's the way they should be viewed once you put them on the layout, and it's spending a huge amount of time trying to do something in the interior to take it to a contest is great for the contest. But if you can build 3 buildings instead, maybe build 3 buildings and make them look really good when you look at them from the outside. So anyway, anybody else got anything exciting and interesting? Look, let me stop talking here.
Sure. Been playing around with my paper stuff.
Oh, Jim, your paper stuff. Well, you got to do a paper clinic for us at some point. Or do another one.
September. So I think you should be seeing what looks to be buildings with a ghost setup there.
You're not sharing yet.
Okay.
There we go. Now you are.
So one thing I found out is that if you're going to light your buildings, that if you're building it from cardstock, you're definitely going to need a black layer, because that's just a light a light that I put behind it, and as you can see, it looked kind of, it doesn't look good.
So this is behind the lights behind the building or in front of the
Yeah,
building?
behind the building. So it just shines right through the cardstock wherever it's white.
Right.
So it's just an experiment I was doing to make sure that if you're building a building and you're going to have it lighted, you need to put something black in between the cardstock
Behind it.
and the light.
Yep.
And also, it showed up something interesting, is that if you look carefully at these areas, is that the range of the dynamic range on this paper is quite impressive, because you can see on these outside ones here is you see nothing but black, and really when you put the light behind them, all of a sudden you start seeing the details in the background.
Hey, Jim, let me ask you a quick question. Obviously, if you were really going to light this, would you build a box around your light, and what material would you use to back the photo?
Black cardstock.
Just straight cardstock would work.
Black cardstock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be really interesting. You probably would have to do this either on a laser cutter or maybe using a cry cut. But if you cut out a black background where you just cut the windows out and illuminated just the windows there. So, in other words, the light was just kind of like I did for the interior printed walls, but instead of doing it as, so just do it with something that's very dark. That would probably make those windows look amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is getting the mullions dark, so the mullions don't look light. That would probably be the biggest challenge. But what you could do is you could cut a black background, stick it on the back. It'd actually have to exactly match the shape of the cutouts for the windows, and glue it on, and then take some stick wood painted black and glue it across where the mullions were. And you would probably make it really amazing when you illuminate it from the inside.
I don't even think I don't even have to go to that much effort on the mullions, to tell you the truth.
Okay, I can't tell from here because they actually look pretty good, but yeah, no, that's pretty interesting. That's the really interesting thought about, because I would think normally illuminating paper buildings is a challenge, but that could be pretty cool. Just pick 3 or 4. You don't need all the windows, just a few of them.
Yeah. So that's the one experiment I did this week, for just to make sure that because I'm designing some buildings to assemble for the clinic.
That would be cool.
And I've done that in the past, so basically, it works out pretty good. Now, the other way to do windows that I've done in the past, for N scale especially, is you can paint gloss on the windows. Basically, it's like take a flat building,
Yep.
print it on flat mat, and then you just put gloss on these little teeny windows. Because I did a Bodie warehouse that way. Basically, I had some little teeny windows, and that was about it for details, and just painted those gloss. They looked okay for N scale. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with paper that's pretty amazing.
No, that's absolutely cool. That's great.
And also, I've got this AKA matte varnish and ultra matte varnish that I've been testing out, and it's pretty damn impressive. The ultra matte is definitely very impressive. It's because I'm looking at basically doing everything here can be built without spray cans, without any kind of nasty toxic chemicals or anything like that. So basically, if you're in a very controlled situation, like you're living in a 1-bedroom place or something like that, it's like you can build this stuff without having
A huge amount of stuff.
Yeah.
Space and junk.
space, junk, and chemicals that you don't want to smell during the rest of the day and things like that. So that's what I've been doing for railroading this past couple
That's
of weeks.
cool.
So
Very cool.
So Jim, when are you going to do that clinic?
it's the September meet.
At the September meet at the
At the
South
Mastic
Bay
Center?
Railroad Historical Society.
Yeah.
Oh, got it. Okay.
We're gonna. So Jim agreed to do. There we have the advantage of that back room, that board room, and you can do a real build clinic. So Jim's going to do a real build clinic, and only be about 8 people can do it because that's about the space that we have back there.
Can I sign up?
I'll put out a sign up when we get closer to the event, probably in August.
I have to run along today early, so I wish everybody a good week, and it was good seeing everybody.
Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Guy. Thanks.
Well, Phil, when you're getting those 49-cent prints, are those?
So I use Mike's photos.
Yeah.
Jim, I'm gonna stop your share there.
Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, unless you're. Yeah. So we have a Mike's Photos in Dublin. There are a few of them around, and they just have a thing where you upload your pictures. They were 70 cents, but last time I went, they were 49 cents.
Are those inkjets or are they laser?
I think they're a laser print. They're a photo printer print. So they're 600 DPI. Here, I'll pull up the website. I'll show you what. Here, hang on.
Okay.
I assume there are other places that do the same. Here, hang on. Let me. So this is.
Are they shiny or are they matte?
They're matte, and they're not perfectly flat, but they're not bad.
Okay.
So basically, this is their website, and you go into their photo services, and you go into online printing, and you order prints, and so basically, you got to start by dropping a file in here. So let me grab a file. I will.
No, I understand. Once I get to the website, I'm sure I can understand.
Yeah, no. So they're like 99. They're like 49 cents a print, and you just put it up there, and they just print them. And I found my Mike's can, the one in Dublin. If I upload them within 4 hours, I get an email saying they're printed. And I just drive over. I just stop by anytime. I generally print them when I know I have to go out and do something, and then I can stop by, and it doesn't cost me anything to stop by there. And yeah, I did and I did all the letters. And one of the things is when you actually look in the window of the station, I actually put a kind of a dispatcher's desk there right inside the window. And when you look in on the dispatcher's desk, you'll see there are a bunch of train orders, and they actually have logos on them and everything. And you can almost kind of see them, even though they're pretty small. So, because the thing about the photo, doing the photo that way is it's actually 1200 DPI, the image that I ship up to them. And I think they printed it at least at 600 DPI. It may be 1200. Because they have those photo print copiers, the ones that are actually designed for photo prints. So, yeah, it's interesting. I was printing stuff at home on my home printer, and I just find these are so much crisper. And plus, then it's heavy stock versus thin paper, so it actually kind of like the floors in that building were all done as an image, and they were built literally board by board as an image. I'll show you how I did that with cropping. And then they were printed. And what I did was I put down some 3x wood stock and then glued them to that. And they just kind of lay across it. But it's stiff enough that even if you got to support every inch and a half, it'll support itself.
Yeah. My printer will print cardstock. So.
Yeah. Well, if you got a really good printer, if you got a better printer, but I have the typical inkjet printer that's 300 DPI, and it's 300 DPI, but the resolution is not actually as good as that in terms of how it registers the dots. So I don't know. It's I've got the one that's the tank one. What is that? It's an Epson, and it's great for printing stuff that you want to print for, just copy stuff. Like when we want to do the layout tour guides and that kind of stuff, it's great for that. But I don't find it's super good for printing stuff that you want to use for modeling.
Yeah, mine's the opposite. Basically, it's like if you want to print out something that's text, it's like it takes forever. But,
Right.
But if you want to print out really nice stuff, it does a good job.
Absolutely. So that's the thing. That's, it's kind of that make or buy, right? You make it yourself versus buying it, and you buy the printer to be able to do it. So that's good.
Yeah.
So that would actually be good to talk about, is what kind of printers you need. That might actually be a good thing just to do generally on one of these sometimes, is talk about printers for printing for models. What kinds of printers there are in that. So, because most of us, I don't think, have any real understanding of, the differences in printers between different brands of inkjet printers, laser printers, et cetera, that you can buy as a consumer. I mean, most of us go to Costco and buy whatever looks good at Costco. It's kind of all we can do. I know that's me.
Yeah, I ordered mine from B&H Camera
Oh.
because it wasn't sold locally, basically. But it's specifically a crafter's printer.
Right. So it's specifically designed to print high resolution, good prints for that.
Yeah, it'll actually do 11 by 17.
Yeah.
Which for like a under $300 printer is pretty damn impressive.
That's good. That's good. But it's not a good family printer for printing out 100-page documents. You're saying printing out my state income taxes that was 78 pages, it would take a while.
Yeah.
So I had a different question for you guys. Old technology. I inherited a camera that's got two lenses in it, and I believe it was used to take 3D slides.
Oh yeah.
And I've got the little slide viewer to look at them with. This an old train guy named Joe Fries had this stuff, and I've looked through some of the pictures he took, including the American Freedom Train in the mid '70s, and the 3D effect through the viewer is really good if you compose the scene well. But my question to you guys is do you know of any photo place left in the Bay Area that would process slide film and be able to mount into these special two picture holders that you put in the viewer?
Well, yeah. So yeah, I think it's actually called stereoscopic.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's actually, you're seeing they're trying to recreate the two positions of the eyes.
Right.
And I go talk to somebody like that, Mike's Camera, and find they may know who does that, or they may do it, or have a place they can send them to.
Mm-hmm.
Because they seem to have, pretty good knowledge of that stuff. I don't know.
It would be fun to get some film, put it in this thing, take a bunch of shots, and see if it still works.
Yeah, I don't know if it uses standard film and just produces two side-by-side images on standard, like 35 millimeter film.
I think that's what it does. Yeah.
Probably what it does. So then it's a matter of after you've basically processed the film, developed it, then you have to put it into the holders.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So a little bit of past news that 2 weeks ago we were at the Hiller Aviation Museum for the springtime show. And Phil, you guys' O-scale narrow gauge stuff wasn't there this year, huh?
Yeah. What happened there? So we do every year a big event in Roaring Camp, and it's a weekend event. It's in Roaring Camp. We take basically all the modules we kind of can. Um, I can show you a picture. It ends up being a big layout. If you've been to Roaring Camp, they have that event room that they normally have weddings and stuff, and we end up taking over that room, and it's a big room. And we had a long conversation about doing both of them, and quite frankly, the group just didn't have the stomach, and especially Dave, has most of our modules, and he has a cabinet shop, so he works all the time, or he normally works, and there just was not a real good desire to do Hiller and Roaring Camp, and because I've been doing Roaring Camp since 2006, and it's a really cool event because you're basically running your trains there in the event center with the doors open in the front when the Roaring Camp trains go by. So it's cool. And then on Saturday they had the American Mustang Society or whatever they are, and they had like 140 Mustangs there. So it's kind of a cool event. And so we ended up deciding to do that and decided not to do Hiller this year. Hopefully it'll all work out next year.
Yeah, that sounds like that would be fun to be at Roaring Camp.
Yeah, actually, I tried 2 years ago when we had that event where we went down to Roaring Camp and we went down for the startup and that. Originally, I was going to do that on the weekend we were there. They call it their Model Railroad weekend. It's typically the first weekend of the season for them as they do this. So it's like the first weekend in April kind of thing. And second weekend in April. And what we were going to do was do something where we had, the idea of a train ride, and that this was last year or the year before last? And the weekend we were supposed to do that was that weekend we had that huge storm a couple of years ago, and they actually had trees fall down over the tracks down there, and they kind of called and said, hey, it'd probably be better if you guys don't come. So we ended up canceling, and I canceled the event because they weren't even going to be open on Saturday that weekend because of the storm. And so we ended up doing it a couple of weeks later. But I'm thinking next year, what I'll probably try to do is set that up with them again in April and do that. And what we did was we had, in the morning, you can go down at 8:30 and watch their steam up and watch them steam up the engines and talk to them and talk to the crews and the engines. And we basically were just hanging out with them in the morning there. And then about 10:30, 11, we did a shop tour, and it was actually their chief engineer who walked us through the shop, and they were rebuilding a shay and talked to us about what they were doing and rebuilding the shay and went through everything. And then we set up that you could ride the train. I think the 12 or 12:30 train, there was a little discount. It was only a couple of buck discount, but it made it so you could ride the train. And then we had a few layouts open in the afternoon down in that area, which is hard because it's hard to get people to go over the hill just to go see layouts. But if you're going in the morning to go up to Roaring Camp, and then in the afternoon, you can go see layouts if you want to. So I think that'd be a good event to do next year, this time of the year. This year, we're doing the Hendy one, as this event, trying to do an event between our winter meet, which we're going to try to do all, we're kind of down a pattern of 4 events, right? The Golden State Model Railroad Museum in February, an auction in May, 1st of June, another event in September at the South Bay Railroad Historical Society, and then another auction in December. So those are kind of our 4, calling for lack of a better word, regular events we're going to try to do. And then between those events, do something where we have a field trip to go somewhere. So this year, the field trip between the one between Richmond and Alameda, between those 2 events was to go to Hendy. Probably next year we'll do the Roaring Camp one as between those 2. And by the way, if anybody has any ideas of events to do like that, let me know. Or if you're part of an organization and say, hey, you guys, we should do this, I'll work with you and we'll set it up, because people seem to like that. We've got, we've got 29 people signed up for the Hendy Museum already. I think we'll probably get up to 30 people. Assuming 25 actually show up out of the 30 or 20, 25. That's not too bad. for us as a group. That's kind of what we get for those kind of events. The other thing we may want to do at some point, either later this year or next year, is go back to go both to two places, one to Ardenwood, to the South Pacific, the Society for the Preservation of Carter Railroad Resources, the guys in Ardenwood, and then also Niles Canyon. I think it'd be fun to go back to Niles Canyon again and do another set of shop tours at Niles Canyon. It's always fun to see what they're doing.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, if somebody's got we went up to the Redwood Valley Railroad because John Cockle's son works up there and he got us into that. So, if someone's volunteering at a location or something, says, hey, you guys should come, we should set up an event there. Be great to do it. I think those are always fun for everybody to do, because you go see things that are interesting. I'm still trying to set up when we're doing the convention. I ended up getting in contact with a guy at BART, and I've been trying to set up a BART tour. So we may end up having later this year a BART tour if we can get that set up. So.
Well, that's it for me today. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, that's it. Well, actually, I'll share with you this picture. This was I found this picture. So this was that, this is when you walk into a contest room and you put your model down and you look around and you see this and you realize you're not going to win. Pretty amazing model.
Yep.
The modeler's name is Larry Tidball.
Yep. It's a brilliant model. I mean, just absolutely brilliant model. I think somebody said it was only the second model he'd ever entered in a contest.
I think it was the first.
Was it the first? I don't know. I remember the first or second. But it's very, very most impressive model. I mean, you look at the. You look at the piping here, and most very impressive overall work on that. Just very nice. So I think he got 124 points out of 125, and they knocked him down 1 point because they said some things were not weathered as much as they should have been. Which I thought was interesting, but it was good. That was a good model. I thought the contest in San Luis Obispo was not unreasonable. We had a number of really good models there. So, and we probably will not do a contest at the auction. We just haven't got enough people to do it. Maybe I think when we get to the South Bay Railroad Historical Society in September, we'll maybe try to have some sort of a contest or event there. But we didn't have a huge turnout for the square foot challenge we did in February. So I don't know. One of the things that the Redwood Empire does is they do call it it's not really a modeling contest. It's more a popular model. So basically the idea is you bring your model in, and then they have a time during their meetup where everybody who brought a model in gets up and talks about their model. And then everybody who's there votes on which was the most popular model and story. So, somebody brought in a model that they built with their father 40 years before and that kind of thing. And so it was kind of interesting. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out a way to get more people to bring models in and participate. So in our little events. Anyway, if anybody's got any thoughts on that, let me know and think about a way to get that. If you've thought about bringing models and what would it take to get you to bring a model to an event? Well, I hate to say it, if everybody's kind of ready to call it, we'll call it. I'm doing backdrops today, so I have to go figure out how to mount some backdrop material. So if there's nothing else, maybe we'll call it a day, and we'll see everybody in 2 weeks. We will not have a formal meetup. And the reason for that is that we will be at the museum. And so I think trying to have a formal meetup, I'll go ahead and leave. The bridge will be open, and I'll put that note in when I send something out that anybody can jump on here, but there won't be a host. So it doesn't really matter. The only thing the host does is spotlights people and throws people out of the meeting. So, I don't think it hasn't been a need to throw anybody out of any of these meetings as far as I know ever. And so the only thing you lose is the ability to spotlight people if they want to show stuff. But if people want to get together and have a little video meetup on the 3rd, they can. But I don't think we'll try to do a formal meetup that day. So between the West Side reunion, if you're a narrow gauger driving up there, or the Hendy Ironworks, I think a lot of people are going to be doing other things anyway that day.
Yeah. Look forward to the Hendy tour. That'll be fun.
I think it's going to be cool. I'm kind of excited about it. I always thought, it's always amazes me when you go back and look at this stuff and how they built it. And of course, my grandfather was a pattern maker in North Carolina, and actually used to work in a big foundry and made the patterns for the foundry work. So it's interesting to see that. And, when I was in college, we actually studied a lot about manufacturing processes. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of some information about that, because they make some pretty amazing stuff there now. I mean, I think they build like all the missile tubes for the nuclear submarines and that kind of thing. So, well, cool. Everybody have a great week, and we will plan on seeing everybody back here in 4 weeks. Hopefully at the Hendy tour in 2 weeks, or at the West Side reunion in 2 weeks.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, Phil.
Bye now. Thanks.